Hey, BookTube.
Hello, BookTube.
How are you? So, tonight, we're going to do a set of recommendations. It was requested that we do this by a friend of mine, and she wanted some recommendations from different genres and things like that, so that's what we're going to do. I guess she trusts our judgment. Most people wouldn't, probably, but I guess she does. That's great. So we're going to do that. Take just a little bit here. We don't have any books to show because actually most of these we either don't own or we're just too lazy to go get because it's been a long day. I think most of them are the latter.
Yeah, I think I know where some of these are. I am just not up to searching for all of them.
Yeah, and besides that, it's hotter than Hades in this room. We left the space heater going accidentally, and it is like probably 85 degrees back here.
It's warm.
I'm sweating. So yeah, and it is like 30 degrees outside, 30 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's crazy that it's this warm back here.
Yeah.
But okay, we're gonna get started on this. We have what, 7 genres? Yeah, and we have 2 or 3 per genre to recommend. So a lot of people have read these. Some of you will not have read these. Some of them may seem intimidating, but I want to promise you, once you get into these, they're not nearly as intimidating as you think. That's one of the things I'd like to get across on our channel, is especially with the classics, with the thicker sci-fi and fantasy works, things like that. They may look intimidating, but get them started.
Mm-hmm.
You never know unless you start, and who knows, maybe within 100, 150 pages you're hooked. And it's really not that hard to read 100 or 150 pages if you put yourself in a quiet room. Set aside the distractions, turn off your phone, and read.
Yeah.
So that's what we've had to start doing.
Yeah. So we made a list of the really, really most obvious
popular genres:
mystery, horror, suspense, romance, sci-fi, fantasy, and classics.
One thing you won't see here is literary fiction. We're not well read on modern literary fiction. We will be.
True.
One day. That'd be something I'd eventually like to delve into a little more once we get our back catalog read.
You'd probably have to pry me away from my cozy mysteries.
Well, yeah, but they're so quick you could do both.
Hey, I read one popular fiction book last month.
Yeah, that's true. I did too.
I feel like this is a good step forward for me.
All right, so I'll let you start.
All right,
we'll start with your favorite.
Mystery. Yay.
Yeah.
And they're not all cozy mysteries. I know you'll be proud of me. So the first, the books, they're both series. Because honestly, I'm not going to pick one book. I picked the Ishmael Jones series by Simon R. Green. I talked a little bit about this in the last video. They're sort of country house mysteries that have a surprising kind of a paranormal twist it's just loads of fun. They're really, really, they're great for dark and stormy night reads. Get your cup of tea, wrap yourself up in a blanket, and read your Ishmael Jones mystery. Because they're so much fun. And Ishmael Jones, he's a great character. Simon R. Green does creepy. He really well. He can put some really good creep factor in his books.
He can. I despise Jim Butcher. Like, I despise his books. I think they're awful. But I do like Simon R. Green.
He does a really good creep factor in his books.
He does some Nightside books. They're called Tales from the Nightside, and they're much better than the Jim Butcher.
Yeah, the Nightside is more of an urban fantasy series, like the Jim Butcher books, but the Nightside, they're really, really dark, and they have they have a heavy British accent.
They do. Yeah.
They're so obviously British. You could have the most American person on the planet reading them, and you would still know they were written by a British dude.
Yep.
All right, so the second series is the Bibliophile Mysteries by Kate Carlisle. They are my very favorite cozy mystery series, and it's about a woman named Brooklyn Wainwright. She's a bookbinder, and you know how all your cozy mysteries have that one thing that the main character is really proficient in. Some of them it's baking, some of them it's dog grooming or something like that. For Brooklyn, she's a a renowned bookbinder, and she goes into all that in her mysteries, and they're so much fun. And they even go into why Brooklyn keeps stumbling upon murders, and it's not like she's just got the worst luck on the face of the planet. They go into why that might even happen to her, and I really like that aspect to them. So I can't recommend them enough. I love the Bibliophile mysteries. I think you would too.
All right, so I want to get into mine. Mine are a little more obvious. The Agatha Christie Poirot novels. If you haven't read them, just start at the beginning and just keep going. I think The Mysterious Affair at Styles was the first one. And just keep going. They are really good. They do not have to be read in order, however. I would recommend you read the first one, and then you can just read them, however.
Yeah, nobody does a good country house mystery like a good Agatha Christie Poirot novel.
Yeah, and I'm not going to say much more about those. They're extremely popular, easy to find.
You've probably read Poirot.
Yeah, you've probably read some Agatha Christie stuff. The next ones I want to recommend are not exactly your classic mysteries. They are police procedurals, and they're the 87th Precinct series by Ed McBain. But I think his real name is Hunter Evans. Or something similar. No, Evan Hunter. Yeah, that's his name, Evan Hunter. That's his, and he has written books under that name. But
Ed McBain's a better cop name.
Yeah, it is. His 87th Precinct books, though, are excellent. Simple stories. Most of them are extremely short.
They are. They're surprisingly short.
Yeah, I can get them read in a day and a half usually. But yep, and those are the ones that I would recommend for for mysteries. So next we're going to do horror.
Yay! So my first pick here is The Shining by Stephen King. I love horror novels. I absolutely love horror novels. And like Bentley Little is one of my very favorites, but he's not on this list. Because there are very few horror novels that have actually made me have to put the book down because it was creeping me out so bad. The Shining is one of those. There were parts of this book that I was reading in the middle of the night, and I'm like 3 o'clock in the morning, cannot put this book down. And then it got to the part with the topiaries, and I had to put the book down because it was scaring the crap out of me. So yeah, Stephen King, The Shining. That one was my favorite Stephen King novel. It is a creepy book.
Yeah, and it's one that we can recommend pretty well to anyone who asks, what horror books do you recommend? And if it's something you have read before, well, we got 4 more here. So what's your next one?
My next one is Swan Song by Robert R. McCammon. This is an epic horror story. It has a huge scope.
Yeah, it's an apocalyptic.
Yeah, it's apocalyptic. It's not post or pre-apocalyptic. It's the apocalypse happens during the book, and it shows different groups of people surviving this apocalypse and traveling from different sections of the country in their own stories, but coming together somehow. It is absolutely amazing. And if you ever get a chance to listen to it on audiobook, do. The narrator is absolutely outstanding.
Yeah, I love Swan Song. I really don't like The Stand, but I do like Swan Song. I mean, I like Stephen King, but I was not a fan of The Stand, but Swan Song really won me over. Really good book.
It's one of my very favorite horror novels just of all time. It's like right there level with one of his that he's about to talk about.
Yeah, I'll talk about it now. It's The Elementals by Michael McDowell. I think it's the 3rd or 4th time I've mentioned it on this channel, but I'm really trying to get people to read it.
We're trying to drive home the fact that it's amazing.
It is. It's so good. It's so simple, and yet there is plenty going on. Yeah, he tells just a great story, a great creepy horror story. Yeah. He's done it with quite a few books. I've read 3 or 4 of his books now, and I'm going to read The Gilded Needle next. I think that's another book by him I want to read. He's got, I think, 26 novels out. I don't think they're all horror though.
Yeah, I think the whole book takes place in basically in one place. There aren't a whole lot of settings and not a whole lot of moving around, he managed through the use of climate and just, what's the word I'm looking
Nature?
for? Yeah.
Natural
Nature,
things?
claustrophobia. He creates this crazy claustrophobic feel that it just doesn't seem like it would work with while you're reading.
Yeah.
But
it
he
does.
somehow manages to pull it off. It's scary.
It is.
It's
very,
creepy.
very good. Yep.
It
Go
is.
read that.
It's so good. Go read it.
The next one is actually by a YouTube author. His name's Adam Cesare. His name's Adam, and then Cesare. If you get a chance, read Video Night. I know it's gotten some really good reviews, and they're all deserved. It reminds me very much of a 1980s horror film.
Yeah.
Like a cheap 1980s horror film, but one of the really good ones.
It's like a group of kids goes and rents a video.
Yeah.
That's the starting premise.
And it's just so good.
It just all sort of snowballs from there.
Yeah, it does. We've both read it, and we both really enjoyed it.
It's a good book.
And then the next one is a book a lot of people have written. I have read A Simple Plan by Scott Smith, but I would say also read The Ruins. It is, the creep factor on that is crazy. It's not, it is scary, but at the same time, it will gross you out.
It's disturbing.
It's very disturbing.
I haven't read it, and I'm scared of it.
Yeah, extremely disturbing. It has some really gross stuff in it, but read it anyway. So we need to go through the next few a little bit quicker.
All right, so Suspense. My first pick was the Pendergast novels by Douglas Preston and Lincoln Child. I love this series, and I love Pendergast. What's his first name?
Aloysius.
Aloysius Pendergast. He's a special FBI agent who gets the really weird cases, and some of the stories, they're just amazing. They're really compelling, and he's just about the perfect FBI agent.
Yeah, I love the Cabinet of Curiosities.
Yeah,
it's so good. Still Life with Crows.
Still Life with Crows was my favorite.
They were both great.
Oh yeah. I am so sorry. I just bumped the table. My second one is a book called Gravity by Tess Gerritsen. It's another book that brings claustrophobia into play because it's about a sort of a viral outbreak in space, and it's procedural. It's very, very visceral. It has a lot of really good science to it, and it makes it really, really believable. It's a creepy book, but if you ever get a chance to read it, do give it a shot.
I do like Tess Gerritsen. I actually didn't care for Gravity, but I think most people would.
Yeah.
It just didn't seem like my kind of book, but
I enjoyed it.
Mine again fairly obvious, but The Silence of the Lambs. I know there are a lot of people that still haven't read it. I say get out there and do it. The Silence of the Lambs and Red Dragon, amazing. Just, read them. They're great. Even if you've seen the movie and they're not that much different than the movie, do it anyway. They're very good. And the second is early Dean Koontz novels. There are a whole lot of Dean Koontz fans who don't realize the guy actually started writing back in the 60s. He wrote under the name Brian Coffey. He wrote under an author named Lee Nichols. Wrote under a name Lee Nichols. And he wrote one called The Servants of Twilight, The Face of Fear, Cold Fire. He wrote some of these books under different names. And they're easy to find now. They're not easy to find in the original names anymore because people started collecting them after they found out he was actually Dean Koontz. Those names were Dean Koontz, but they are definitely good. The Servants of Twilight is one of my all-time favorites. It's about a cult. It's very cool.
Love a good cult story.
Yeah, it was good. So those are my picks for suspense.
Okay.
And I have none for romance. Becky's going to go through hers.
You could have done like Pride and Prejudice. It's still a romance.
Yeah. But you're done.
So. All right. So romance. I have 3 suggestions for this one. For one book, but this is actually a series, and I love the title. The title is The Strangely Beautiful Tale of Miss Percy Parker by Leanna Renee Hieber. And it's truly a strangely beautiful tale. It has stuck with me. I read it many, many years ago, several years ago. And for some reason, it has really stuck with me. Even just the look of the main character. She's very pale, has like ghost white hair. It's just really, really neat. But it's a very, very sweet romance tale that I think anybody who's a fan of romance should read. The next one is it's another single book. It's The Scarletti Curse by Christine Feehan. I'm sure that's how her name is pronounced.
I'm not sure.
I think so.
I didn't look
Could
up.
be Feehan.
Or Feehan.
Feehan. Could be Feehan.
Yeah.
But anyway, Christine Feehan, she does the Dark series. They're Carpathian. They're Carpathian novels. They're about vampires and their good counterparts. Shush you! Nobody asked you. You didn't have a romance section.
Nope, but I tried.
You don't know. You don't get to have
I tried
an opinion on this one.
Yeah. Okay.
You did not try reading the Dark series.
Yes, I did.
No, you didn't.
Yes, I did.
No, you didn't.
I read the first one.
No, you read the Shadow
No.
Game books.
No, and I started the Dark series as well.
Well, there's no accounting for taste. Anyway,
True, yeah.
The Scarletti Curse is a very, very good gothic romance story that Christine Feehan did before. I think it was. Well, no, it was probably during the Dark series, and both series are just fantastic. They're loads of fun. They're bodice rippers, of course.
That means there's buggering on every fourth page.
There's not buggering on every fourth page. Especially in the later books, it maybe happened like twice, maybe 3 times in the book.
Yeah, but it still lasted 25 pages.
Not all of them.
Okay.
Shush you. I'm talking. All right. So my third series, my third suggestion is the Lynsay Sands Argeneau series. Now, again, these are paranormal romances. They're vampires, but they're hilarious. Lynsay Sands, she somehow manages to get her heroines into some of the worst situations. and they always prove to be absolutely hysterical. And they keep things from being just too cloying, if that makes sense. It's a really good palate cleanser, the hilarity that she puts in her books. But those are my suggestions for romances. But yeah, they in every single one of them is a paranormal romance. I am so sorry.
So, I'll start with the sci-fi.
Do it.
Because I have a few more than Becky's got on this one. I'll start with, again, a fairly obvious one. But, it's one a whole lot of people haven't read because they think it is kind of difficult. And it's not.
It's big.
Because it is thick.
It's ginormous.
I'd say less than 600 pages probably. And it's not as dense as it's given credit for, but it's Dune by Frank Herbert.
It's rather daunting to some people.
I would say
pages.
Dune is right there, and it's probably my favorite novel of all time. Like, not just sci-fi book, it's my favorite novel of all time.
It's good.
And over time, it's actually climbed the ladder to be my favorite novel of all time, while some others have fallen. This one has just stayed there. Please go read it. It is an amazing world-building exercise. It is wonderful. Go read it. Rendezvous with Rama by Arthur C. Clarke, who I would consider is probably my favorite author, or one of my 2 or 3 favorite authors. So it is very interesting because it is people who land on an asteroid as it's moving 40,000 miles per hour. And this was written back in the 60s, I believe. Mid to late 60s, and this is something that actually took place a few years ago. NASA actually landed something on an asteroid moving very, very fast through space. So Arthur C. Clarke was ahead of his time with his ideas.
Can you imagine the math that has to go into something like that?
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
No.
The next one is Revelation Space by Alistair Reynolds. This is a series. I've read the first 2, and I really enjoy them. Revelation Space, they are, again, books that are thought to be pretty complex, and they're not. They're not as complex as they're given credit for. As long as you pay attention, they're wonderful. They're great books. One. Yeah, no, you really should. I think you'd enjoy them.
Yeah, I think I should.
And the last one I'll mention is Waystation by Clifford D. Simak. And God, it's a dark comedy, and it is absolutely hilarious and just extremely well written. And it's the only book by him I've read, which is kind of a shame. I loved it so much. And I've heard it's his best, so I was kind of afraid to read anything else.
Sure.
But yeah, so those are my 4 recommendations. They're great.
I have 2 recommendations here, and the first one is Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card. Ender's Game is another one of those books that has really stuck with me because
Great.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think that the author's attention to detail is just fascinating. I remember there was this one scene where Ender's walking down the hall, and he can see that the floor sort of curves up away from him because he's walking down the hall of a space station.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason, that has really stuck with me. I don't know why, but I loved that scene. That it's a great book. Yep. And it's a really good introduction to sci-fi. If you're not much of a sci-fi person, it's very good.
It is. You don't even have to be a sci-fi fan to enjoy Ender's Game.
And another book that's a really good introduction to sci-fi is Wool by Hugh Howey. Is it a series of short stories or novellas, or is that what?
I don't know. I haven't read it.
It was actually like 5 sections. Wool was
right.
It reminds me a lot of City of Ember, but a little darker. And it's like the entirety of the world is encased in this silo that goes straight down into the earth. Floors upon floors upon floors. The further down you go, the lower class you get. Which, boy, that's a really good metaphor. But it's very, very, very strongly, it strongly revolves around class distinction and around the way different classes are forced to interact with each other, because they all live in this one silo. They're all equal, as anybody could see, but depending on how far down they live, the lower their class goes. And it's very, very interesting.
That's familiar, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like a big metaphor with a book cover.
Yeah, so with fantasy, we're almost done.
Fantasy. All right, so my suggestions here. My first one is The Redemption of Alphalus by David Eddings. I wanted to. I was thinking about the Belgariad, but The Redemption of Alphalus is one of my very favorite books ever. So if
I'm not sure it'd be one I would recommend to a newbie to fantasy, though.
No, I don't think I would. For a newbie to fantasy, I would suggest the Belgariad.
It's like 800 pages.
It's a big
book, yeah.
Yeah, it's a big book, but it's really, really epic. It has a really big scope again. Then my next is Lord of the Rings by Tolkien.
Yeah,
of course.
You have to put that down.
It has to be on here somewhere.
Yeah.
And then my last is the Xanth series by Pierce Anthony. I've loved this series since I was a child.
Yeah, it's great.
I love this series. It's funny. It's like the whole country of Xanth is shaped like Florida.
Because Pierce Anthony lives in Florida.
Because Pierce Anthony lives in Florida. Everything else above Florida is Mundania. It's just the land of no magic. It's hilarious.
Yeah,
it really is. They're so much fun to read, and they just get funnier the further he goes.
All right. My first one that I'll recommend is the Dark Elf trilogy by R.A. Salvatore. And at the same time, I'll do the book, what are they? The books by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman, the Dragonlance Chronicles. I love them. Yeah, she didn't care for them because...
Oh, they made me mad.
Yeah, she gets too upset with content. But that's
all right. It's a book.
Yeah, but...
It's content.
But it is... very well written, but the Dark Elf trilogy is great, especially if you were raised playing Dungeons and Dragons. If you've ever played Dungeons and Dragons, you got to read the Dark Elf trilogy by R.A. Salvatore. Please, Drizzt Do'Urden is a great character, and they need to be read. The next is the Mistborn trilogy by Brandon Sanderson. Now, this is one I would not recommend for newbies to fantasy at all. It has a great magic system. It has okay world building. I don't think it's one of the best built worlds, but I do enjoy it.
It's very reminiscent of a lot of
It is.
countries and worlds in here that we know and love.
Yeah, very much so. But it is very good. And if you've read fantasy before, go for it. Just don't start with it. And the next we're going to do are classics. These are, well, just kind of the books that people describe as classic books.
Yeah.
Mine are well over 150 years old for both of them, so I definitely call them classics. Bleak House by Charles Dickens, one of my all-time favorite novels. Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. Believe it or not, I recommend it to everyone to go read. Even young teenagers could get into this book. I think it was actually written mostly for younger people. It's not a hard read. It does take a little bit of time to get into the language, but once you're there, you're fine. And then one again I wouldn't say to start with, but Moby Dick by Herman Melville. Start it, read it. It is not a hard read. I don't know where it got that. I mean, yeah, sure, it meanders into weirdness, but that's part of the charm of the book. I mean, read it and learn. Yeah. There's a lot to learn from Moby Dick, from whaling to the psychology of people stuck on a ship, for months and months at a time. It is a great book.
Yeah. Please
read it.
For me, my classics are Persuasion by Jane Austen, because I haven't been talking about her for the last week or anything. It has beat out Pride and Prejudice for me. I think I love Anne Elliot as a heroine. She's just amazing. Then another amazing heroine is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. I should probably reread that one after watching a lot of people talk about Bronte, especially like was it Steve Donahue who was talking about her? I can't remember. Talking about how she's just a little bit of a doormat.
I don't know.
But I remember Jane Eyre as just loving that book. I absolutely love the book. I like how she goes from rags to riches and doesn't really change all that much on the way. She's still true to herself. She's still Jane Eyre. And the last one, I kind of win for the age of the authors here.
Yeah.
It's the Canterbury Tales by Chaucer. I had the distinct pleasure of reading these in the Middle English. Actually take an entire class on Chaucer in my master's program. And I have a really, really healthy like for Chaucer. And especially for the way he can put a sentence together, even in the Middle English. He was a genius.
Yep.
And I can't recommend Chaucer enough to anyone. Although if you've never read anything in the Middle English, I do not suggest it. Find you a good translation. Whatever you do, don't try. You will never read it again.
Oh, no, you could probably do it side by side.
Well, yeah, but you'd still need to start it with the translation.
Oh, sure.
Because it's like reading a different language.
Well, it is a different language.
Especially, well, no, it's just the beginnings of our language.
Okay.
It's the same language. It's just, and if you listen to somebody read it out loud, it actually sounds like our language somewhat, but it's weird. Very weird.
All right, so that's going to be our suggestions, and Rita, that we took your advice and we put this video up, so we hope you enjoy it, and we hope everybody enjoys it. Mm-hmm. And if you have any more suggestions for someone who is new to a genre, leave them below.
Yeah,
absolutely. To your favorite genre, leave them below. That way, when people watch this video, they can go down and read your suggestions as well. So
yeah.
So we'll leave it there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we'll see you here in just a little bit.
Your books are calling. Go read.